Hello, everyone. I'm John Higgins, contributing writer to Film and TV Now, and also the curator of the YouTube channel John Higgins Film Review. And I'm delighted to be here talking with Evan Marlowe, who's the director of a brand new horror film called ABRUPTIO. It's an unusual thing because it's actually a film set against the backdrop with characters that are in fact puppets. And we're going to be talking about its run on the festival circuit and, of course, the unusual concept that we have here. So, Evan, warm welcome to you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so this is one of the most unusual movies I've seen in ages, simply because it's a concept, but it's done with lifelike puppets. Now, it took me a while to adjust to the fact that we've got kind of like lifelike, real life driving, and it feels a kind of surreal world because we're watching like real life cars and real world, but we're watching puppets. So tell us about how it all started.
It was about we had just finished our second feature in about 13, and then I started working on my third feature, which I figured I would write. The first two was Carrie, my wife, who's the producer and also does some acting in this film, and the other two. So I was just coming up with an idea. Carrie came up with the original idea, she says, although this was so long ago that I don't really remember the genesis exactly. But she said she came up with the idea of having people with bombs in their neck. And I guess they had to carry out tasks or the bomb would go off. And then she says, I woke up with the idea that this had to be life-size puppets. And I vaguely remember the exchange, but not really. But her memory's always been better than mine. She's about 9 years younger, and she remembers exactly me waking up from a dream saying these have to be life-size puppets, and she thought it meant like Sesame Street, some sort of thing. I was like, no, these look like people, but they're puppets. So I guess that was the origin of it. Then I wrote the script, I guess, with that in mind to work that in thematically, so it made sense. And then kind of kept going back and forth between this idea and the script and the production to kind of sort of milk it and get the most out of it. But when you take years to do something, you have time to tweak it a little bit here and there until it's just right.
Hmm. And I mean, it's honestly, I mean, I was watching it last night and I'm thinking, am I gonna get through this? But I mean, you've got some incredible makeup effects and exploding heads. I mean, that was something that I noticed because when people die in this, they got the puppets die quite vividly. So could you tell us a little bit more about the makeup style of it and how many were in your team, and how did you manage to get those little effects done?
Well, typically a film day would be me and my wife. I do the directing and most of the technical stuff, and she would do, production design and and all the other bits that I don't want to do. That's on the production end of it. And then we occasionally have some help here and there, maybe one or two other people, but usually it's just three or four of us for every scene, with a few exceptions. And that's how it was over the course of the years because we just didn't have the budget to bring in other people, and it's just easier if you're on your own. You just pick up a camera and rent a location and do it. When we're filming in our garage, which we did for a lot of it, it's easy to do whatever we want. But when you're out on set, they don't want blood on anything, so we had to do, unfortunately, some of that after in post production. I like to do everything practically, but it just wasn't possible with some of these effects. So I try to rely on everything being done, with stuff on the day, but occasionally that's not possible.
Hmm. And let's talk a little bit about your cast. I mean, I'm just looking at the list here. You've got Christopher McDonald, who famously played Gina Davis's overbearing husband in Thelma and Louise. You've got Jordan Peele. You've got Robert Englund. I mean, how did you manage to assemble the cast for the film, and how did you get them interested in your concept?
I think getting them interested was the easy part. You just sort of pitch this, and you're working with people in the horror genre, and I think a lot of them are very used to films that push the envelope. And when something like this comes along, it's not. I mean, it is kind of shocking, and I think the script was unsettling, but the idea is intriguing enough to draw people in, and I think people that work in horror kind of are accepting of it. If I said I'm just going to make a straightforward drama with puppets, I think it might have been a little bit jarring, but people coming from horror kind of accept that. All right, well, this is just a new direction for horror. It's gone in all sorts of different phases over the course of many decades, and this is just another direction it's going in.
Hmm. So let's talk about the festival circuit, because I was just looking at the list. You got an amazing bunch of festival logos. I was just looking at the press kits. I mean, tell us a bit about the festival circus. I mean, what was it like when you first showed it to the festival? And what was the first festival? And how has the momentum built over the course of the various screenings that you've had? And what tend to be the things that people are gravitating towards when they see the film for the first time?
I kind of get the sense that festival programmers and film reviewers generally have been very positive about the film because, they've watched a lot of things and this is different and they appreciate the amount of craftsmanship that goes into it just to begin with. But if you're familiar with horror, you kind of start of seeing how I'm playing with some of the tropes, and there's Easter eggs and things like that throughout the movie that call back to other films, horror films, sci-fi films of the 70s that are subtle in a lot of regards. But if you're a fan of horror, you kind of pick up on a lot of that stuff. So I think they're appreciating that, and the reason why I'm doing that, and the reason why there's puppets. So I think that group of people have been very favorably responsive to it. There's a group of people that are just don't want to watch puppets. They don't. I mean, some people aren't fans of horror to begin with, so this isn't a good fit for them. But also, just watching life-size puppets is just too unsettling for a lot of people, and a lot of them admit that. It's like even film reviewers are like, I just don't like puppets. They creep me out too much. I didn't know if I could watch this movie. It's like, all right, fine, set that phobia aside, and give us your honest opinion about the film. But and they have, and I think generally it's been across the board, but generally tilting more towards very favorable from people that have seen it in the public, as well as film critics and festival directors.
And I mean, this is another thing because I think the last time we had something similar to this that was kind of extreme was Team America World Police. And I was just curious to know in terms of what your cinematic influences were. Let's talk a little bit about your creative journey from when you started. I mean, what was the spark that got you into filmmaking? What films did you watch that kind of said, yes, this is something I want to do? And what are the things that have helped shape your career to date?
Well, I started off in the 70s, really, as a kid when Star Wars came out, and that had a huge impact on me. And then I started doing little stop motion films with Star Wars figures, and then claymation, and then graduated to live actors and sound, and had a film. I started a film club. I co-started with some other friends, and we raised money selling candy on campus in high school. So that kind of was the origin of it. And just, I think that was just a great time to grow up in the 70s, as far as culture in general, but film specifically. The films coming out in the 70s were extraordinary. And I think one of the first experience I had with horror was in the 70s when my mom accidentally took me to see Alien with my friends, not knowing what it was. And even asking the person that, the concessions if it was scary, but they said they'd come get us out of the movie before the scary bits start. And they never came. So me and my friends were literally hiding behind the seats watching this movie. But it kind of gave me the understanding of the power of film and horror specifically to really get to you and get under your skin. So I think that was it. But aside from horror, Duel was on every year at Thanksgiving time from Spielberg. Spielberg's been a huge motivator for me. I grew up, when Poltergeist, E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, these films were just coming out one after another growing up. And there's just so much magic in these movies. You just can't help being inspired by them as a potential filmmaker. It's just over the years, I would just analyze films and criticize them, in my head and look at ways they could be better. So I think just looking at films critically over the course of many years kind of got me to where I am now. As far as influences for this film, I call back to a lot of 70s horror and sci-fi, Argento, and noir, which I love. But I think the overall feeling, most people have compared it to David Lynch in the sense that it just kind of feels disjointed and not really in reality. It's just a certain layer that the puppets bring to it that makes it that you're not really in this world when you're watching it. And I kind of would agree with that. I always kind of am guided by my subconscious when I'm creating things. So I wasn't intentionally putting any kind of influence into the film, but it just kind of seeps out because of the other things that I love when I tell a story.
I mean, obviously now because this film's generating enough momentum because it is a left field film. I mean, you've just talked about David Lynch's David Lynch's work. I mean, Eraserhead, when that first came out. I mean, I remember when it first came out on video in the UK, it was one of the very first cult VHSs, and we didn't really know what it was. And when it appeared on late night TV, we couldn't get it. We didn't get it because it's a David Lynch film, and that's carried on through things like Inland Empire. So do you see this as the first of a series of works where you're going to use this kind of technique to tell stories? Do you feel that, you can sort of explore it in, say, other genres?
Well, I would say as far as the first point of not getting a film, that body of work is something I do get, because there's most of life you can't explain things. It's just that's how life is. So surrealism understands that, and paints a picture that realistic films sometimes fail to do, because that's just more in touch with how life really is. It's just unexplainable. So I understand the world of David Lynch very well, and I never gave it a second thought watching his films. As far as puppets as a way, I would hope so. I would hope that opens the door for people creating films with puppets. I'm not sure it will, but hopefully it will at least motivate filmmakers to think outside the box and come up with new ways of expressing themselves that maybe haven't been tried before.
Hmm. And I mean, could you talk a little bit about shooting on location with puppets? Because that's an interesting one. Because of course you are, you can have like a kind of disjointed perspective because you are doing it. But what I quite admired about this movie was there's scenes with the puppets driving the car, for example, and that was something that I thought was quite ingenious, because I'm sort of watching it and then you're thinking, are they the real hands and stuff like that? So tell us a little bit about when you're shooting, say the logistics of shooting something in a car and stuff with these puppets.
Well, the advantage that we had was we don't have a producer breathing down our neck telling us we have to finish it. So we could literally take 6 months to plan a shoot, like I did with, we were gonna try to get the whole thing made in 2020, and that didn't happen because we had lockdown. But it also gave me the time to kind of breathe and think about things and design the puppets and rework things. So a lot of it is problem solving. So there are certain tricks that occur during in almost in every scene that I had to like wrap my head around and try to figure out without doing everything in visual effects. I didn't want visual effects smoke coming out of the police chief's mouth. I wanted actual smoke, and it was during lockdown. We had masks on, so I couldn't just blow into a pipe. So we had to, problem solve the driving a car, laying an egg, whatever it was. Every scene presented a challenge, moving the camera a certain way that we wouldn't see the puppeteer. And that's one of the reasons why I liked the movie. I wanted to make it because it was, this series of obstacles that you had to get around, and still make the film engaging so that people are invested in this world and want to go along on the ride with these characters.
Hmm. I mean, it does reflect social ills and mental health, and we've got a lead character that really has an overbearing mother, which are classic tropes, which have been from years of watching movies like the underdog and stuff. Um, I mean, in terms of writing the script, how long did it take you to finish in total? Were you writing as you went, or did you have a finished script?
I think I can't remember, it's so long ago, but I would say probably it was a few months to write the first draft. Because I remember, I think I must have been in the shower when this happened, because it's probably where most of my good ideas come from. I said, well, it's not just the lead character that has a bomb. Let's just make it everybody on the planet. Everyone's got a bomb, and they all have to carry out deeds, and then all of civilization's crashing. So once that happened, once that idea came to me, it became a lot easier to kind of develop this. Once I had the idea for puppets, then I could kind of work that in there thematically and figure out how I can make the most of having puppets. How are we being compelled to do certain things or think certain things because of our past or our parents, or external forces. And then, yeah, there are certain tropes, which I also wanted to explore. There's a lot of horror tropes that I kind of work with here, in the movie, but a key among them is how women are treated, and what happens when we have this sort of character that's sort of grows up with a mom he doesn't quite like very much and gets in relationships with women that aren't very healthy, and how he turns his, instead of looking inward and seeing what he can possibly develop in his character, sees this as some kind of vile force on the outside brought onto him as victim by women, and how that manifests in his fantasies. So I kind of wanted to explore that, which some people get and some people don't get. But I think that's all there too. But as far as the writing, you tinker with the script over the course of years. When you bring on a new actor, you tailor the role to them. You kind of rework their lines to fit them, which was, when you have Sid Haig in mind, you know how he's going to deliver his lines most likely. So you rework his parts a little bit. But generally, once you lock down the vocal tracks for a film like this, you can't really go back and do much with it. You're stuck with it. So um, you kind of have to work with what you have. And as it was about a couple years ago, we had, still a lot more to do. We had like another 10 pages and another major character. And I said, forget it. I'm not spending another 2 or 3 years in production here. We're just going to cut and consolidate, which is what I did, and wrap the film finally. So it means like killing your babies, basically. You just have to be able to do that.
And then finally, in terms of actually getting distribution and everything, I mean, how difficult was it to get the film into festivals when you're pitching a film or trying to present it to distributors and marketing people? I mean, what were the challenges you had?
Well, the festivals have been very enthusiastic. There's just so many films now. It's so easy to make films. The cost of making films has gone way down now. So there's perhaps a lot more competition getting into festivals. That said, we had a good cast and a novel concept that made it a little easier. But as far as distribution, and from the very beginning, from the time we were trying to get investment, it was just such a challenging idea. There's nothing that we can compare it to, and just the idea of doing something with puppets, people just couldn't get their head around. So that was a really tough sell, and that's part of the reason why it took years to make the movie, because we just couldn't convince people this is actually going to look really cool, and there's a huge market for it. We have a distributor in place now, so it'll be launching probably early next year. It's going to be a very big name, who you probably know, and it'll be available hopefully worldwide, and we're excited about that. And I think just based on the past year that the reception should be pretty good.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up. We've got two final questions. I mean, what's next for you on what's your next project?
Well, I have lots of ideas. I've been writing books and scripts for the past several years. It's not easy to make a feature, so you just tend to like write a script here or there. But mostly, I've been focusing my ideas into short stories and novels, because that's a lot easier to publish up on Amazon than getting a film produced. So all my ideas have been going into literature, and then those are easier to adapt if I ever get to the idea. But if this film is a success, I hope that somebody will kind of ask me what's next, and I've got plenty of ideas to offer.
Okay, and my final question is what are you most proud of about Abruptio?
I mean, the fact that we did something entirely different. I mean, I love all of it. The voice performances are great. The puppets are amazing. And I think it all came together and this gave this vibe that I was going for. But the fact is that we did something that was unthinkable and probably not doable when I started out. And I managed to do it almost, as a very small skeleton crew. I'm very proud of the people that hung with us. My wife stuck with it, and all of our friends helped out. And I'm very proud of the work that we all did.
Okay, well, Evan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and reflections on this film. It is unusual. That's exactly what makes it so appealing. I think people who have already seen it probably know what we're talking about. As for the rest of you who will get a chance to see this as and when on the festival circuit or on download or wherever you're going to get it, please do check it out. And again, support independent films like this. I mean, these guys, it's not easy to make a movie. It's not easy to market it. Just wrapping up, you can see this recording on my YouTube channel. Lots of content on there as well, so do check this out. You can look at my articles and reviews and interviews on my through my work with Film and TV Now. That's filmandtvnow.com. And of course, you can look at the new film resource website, whatsmovie.co.uk, which we are currently developing. So on that note, Evan, thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you well and have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much. Take care.